Welcome to the No Guilt Fangirls Podcast, where liking what you like is never a bad thing. Here's your host and head fangirl in charge, Patty Holiday.
Hey y'all, I'm your host and head fangirl in charge, Patty Holiday. Welcome to the No Guilt Fangirls Podcast. Season 4 has been all about the series that are coming out on Disney Plus from Marvel. And that is because, well, if you know me, that's like my number one fangirling thing of all times is the MCU. And I'm so excited because we've had a little break after Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and now we get to jump into the series I think most of us fans have been waiting for. Some of us have been waiting for this since forever. Thor 1 came out. Yeah, right. I mean, it's honestly like when we met Loki, some of us were immediately buying in going, we need a whole movie with this guy. So it's very exciting that it's finally kind of coming to fruition in this really cool way. Now, just a reminder, if you're new around here or haven't had a moment yet to leave a 5-star rating or a review, I would appreciate you doing so. It helps other fangirls and fanboys find us, and everybody likes to talk about exciting stuff like this with somebody, and that's why we do this, kind of recapping each episode. And we just got to get it out. We just got to get it out, and it's no fun to fangirl alone. So definitely invite your friends. Okay. My friend Ashley is here, and Ashley's actually been with me all season long. So welcome, Ashley, and thank you for hanging in there with me. This has been a lot of fun.
Oh, I've had such a blast. I love fangirling the Marvel cinematic universe.
You do.
And I've been super. Loki has always been my number one show since they made all the announcements. So I'm so excited that we're here and we can talk Loki now.
Yes, and so Ashley has a little aspect of her fangirl and fandom that I don't possess, and I think is going to be very helpful, particularly with this series, is that she is not just an MCU fan like I am, she is also a big comic book geek. So she knows a lot of what these things are that we're seeing in these series that I don't know what that is. And in fact, this is not a spoiler. I'm not going to tell you guys anything about it, but Ashley and I both received advanced screeners. So we've seen episode 1 and 2. We are only going to talk about episode 1 today. So don't worry. We're not going to jump ahead, but there are things that have happened that literally, as soon as I finished watching them, I said, Ashley, who was that? Ashley, what is this? Ashley, explain to me. So she's my little personal gift to you is that you get access to Ashley if you are not a comic book person, and you also need to know who these people are or what is happening here or why that matters or, what's about this clock? Who was that clock? When we saw that on the poster for Loki, I was immediately like, somebody tell me who this clock is, because I don't get it. All that will be revealed. Ashley's going to break it down for us. She's going to come from the comic book angle and tell us a little bit of those things that some of us who are just MCU fans maybe didn't catch or didn't know. Ashley, tell us a little bit about yourself, where we can find you online in case anybody would like to read your other writings.
Awesome. Well, hi, everyone. I'm Ashley Saunders, and you can find me on my website with ashleyandco.com, on Twitter at @AshleyAaron, and I'm also over at cbr.com sharing nerdy theories and doing breakdowns over there. And if you want to talk Marvel Weekly, I co-host a Twitter chat, #Marvel Mondays at noon Eastern time. And and I'm also a co-host of a podcast with Jana, who's also been on the show with me, Geek Girls Universe. So.
Oh, yeah, that too. Yeah. So go give them a follow, and you can find Ashley in all those places. Like I said, if you are new around here or aren't sure what this is all about, what we do is we're going to recap and discuss Loki every week after it comes out. Usually these episodes will probably be posted probably by Monday the following. That way it also gives everybody a little bit of chance to watch it. But I don't know, it might be sooner because Loki comes out on Wednesdays versus Fridays. So who knows? Maybe I won't say Ashley because she always has her ish together. But I will throw this on myself. Sometimes I don't. And so hopefully our schedule works out and we can get together a little sooner, and maybe we can aim for Friday episode drops. But TBD. Just hang in there. If you hit subscribe, it'll show up in your podcast listening app. And that's all you need to know is that every week we are going to talk about Loki. And it's going to be very spoilery and just basically run down the recap of the episode. All right. Does that cover everything?
I think so.
All right. So we want to start, though, first. I actually had somebody request this, and I apologize that, again, I blame myself. I was not able to get my ish together. But we had somebody in our Facebook group, which is No Guilt Disney Pod, if you're interested in joining that, who reached out, and she said, what would be awesome is if we could do a whole backstory of Loki in the MCU. This actually request came from Jen. Hey, Jen. And I said, yeah, that's great. That's awesome. I'll get with Ashley. I'll do it. And I didn't do it. So Jen, this is for you. We're going to give a little brief rundown of this character and what we know about him up to this point. And just a small spoiler alert right here, right up front. This matters for this movie, at least in this first episode that I call it a movie, this series. This first episode that we saw, they absolutely had some moments and some callbacks to previous Lokiisms and Loki situations that I think are going to be super important. I think it's going to play out across the course of this series, that some of that history of him is going to matter. So, as always, if you haven't seen those movies and you are curious what you should watch to understand Loki or what movies, feature him, I have a list of that. It's on my blog. I will link it in show notes for you. But we're also going to talk just briefly kind of about who he is and what's up with Loki for you to kind of give you an edge going into this. Okay, so Ashley, tell me what you love about Loki.
Oh, gosh. So Loki's a favorite of mine. From the comics, from mythology. If you don't know, Loki, Thor, Odin, all of them are based on Norse mythology. It's kind of where they get their godly names. Some of the storylines have been tweaked for the comics, which is fine. And that's super complicated, and I'm not going to go into those changes. But know that they're part of Norse mythology, and I'm a big mythology nerd. So I just nerd out over Thor and Loki. And yeah, I mean, how can you not love him? First of all, it's Tom Hiddleston playing Loki. And I don't think there's anything I've seen Tom in that I don't like, simply because it's him. And he's so charming and he's so brilliant in his acting. And Loki is just a mischievous scamp, as he called himself. He's lovable. And it's funny because even when he's at his worst, I still find things about him that I love. And I've never pegged him as a villain. He's just a very complicated anti-hero who sometimes makes bad choices.
Yes, which I think we can all see a little of ourselves in Loki. I mean, hopefully we're more on the side of making better choices most of the time, but every now and
Yes.
then makes a bad one. But, you can see, I kind of give him that grace as well. I'm on that same camp with you. I never ever hated Loki. I was never mad at Loki. I was just like, why are you doing this, Loki? Come on, man. Throughout his whole history in the MCU. And as you watch the movies and as you learn about his history and his background, you start picking up that he is, as you put it, very complicated. And I think that one thing that we have to give all that credit, at least I'm going to give all the credit to, is to Tom Hiddleston and the way he portrayed
100%.
This character. I can't, when I think Hiddleston, I think Loki. I hope he doesn't hate that. I know he's done plenty of other amazing shows and works that he's just fabulous in, but he is Loki, and it just would not have been the same with a different actor in this role. So, and also, guys, if you have not listened to the story of my friend Julia meeting Tom Hiddleston and her fangirl episode, we did a fangirling of Tom Hiddleston. Just look back on your player. I just republished it, actually, but we originally put it out, I don't know, 2 years ago, maybe at this point. But I just republished it because I thought it was timely, and I thought you would need an introduction to the amazing Julia, because she's also going to guest on this series later on as we go on. we're letting her watch this episode first because, like I said, Ashley and I got to see it a little bit ahead of time. And so we're recording this a little bit ahead of time. But we'll bring Julia on and you guys will be able to get get her impressions as somebody who is just probably the biggest Tom Hiddleston fan that I know. And I know that she's just been like training for this show her entire life. And I don't think that's an exaggeration whatsoever. Okay, so Loki, he is the brother of Thor.
Mm-hmm.
He is, let's correct that. He is the adopted brother of Thor. So explain a little bit of their family situation and history for those that don't know.
Okay, so Loki was an infant abandoned in Jotunheim, which is the realm of the frost giants in the Thor mythology. And Odin rescued him and raised him alongside Thor, and he didn't know any better. He just thought he was another son of Odin. He was called, he wasn't called Loki Odin's son like Thor was, but he always was, Odin's son. However, he was very close to his mother, not Odin. In the events of Thor, the first Thor movie, Loki finds out that he's actually a frost giant and not an Asgardian. And yeah, so it's complicated. It's a complicated history. But Thor loves him as a brother. Frida loves him as a son. Odin is not the best dad, so I don't really think we should talk about how he feels. But we do know by the end in Ragnarok, which is the third Thor movie, that Odin does refer to Loki and Thor as his sons, plural. So even though he is the adopted brother of Loki, they are very much a family unit, and they bicker like siblings do. But, godly siblings who happen to also have godly powers.
Yes. And there's some references to their very complicated history that come up in this episode.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I don't think it's so deep that as a new person, you're not going to catch or understand. But one thing to point out that I think is important is that he absolutely always loved his brother, even if they were, bickering and fighting quite a bit, but he always had his brother's back and he always loved him. So Loki and Thor and Loki, like they go together. And then Frigga, like he and his mom were tight, like super tight.
Yes.
If he loved anybody more in the world than Thor, it was definitely her.
Mm-hmm.
And those things are just things you need to know about this guy before we go forward. Now, in the early Thor movies, he's kind of more the bad guy and trying to, take over the world, and he comes to New York and makes a hot mess of things. And so Loki gets to play up the villain aspects. And then later through the MCU, things shift and we get a different side of Loki. He's still playful. He's still that mischievous scamp, as you said. But he does have some changes. And what I find fascinating is how he as a character has changed over the course of the MCU. And then now they're feeding us. They are feeding us so well. They are giving us this story that's all playing off of timelines. And I mean, I've got thoughts as to where things could be going with all of this, but I also don't want to play that game because I got burned so badly with WandaVision, if you remember. So maybe we'll keep that off the podcast. You and I can talk about that separately, but I am very curious to see what happens, because even in this episode, there was some discussion of the timeline of his life, and you could see this progression and you could see it affecting him. And it was so freaking cool. It was so brilliant. It was so smart. It was so Tom Hiddleston. Like, it was just so good. So, all right. That being said, anything else like that you feel like we need to mention, particularly about Loki? He dies. That's not a spoiler. He dies at the end of, which movie is it? Is it Infinity?
He dies at the beginning of Infinity War.
Thank you. The beginning of Infinity War. So that is something to know. Loki had a story that we thought was complete. And then, like I mentioned, this whole series plays with timeline and plays with time. So, who knows, right?
Right. Well, what's important to note, if you're kind of like, wait, what? By what we just said, this is not the Loki that died brought back to life. This
Correct.
series follows
Correct.
2012 Loki, which is the Loki that is in the first Avengers movie. So this is Thor.
The Loki that messed up New York.
Yes. So if you're thinking movies, the first Thor movie has occurred. Avengers has occurred. None of the rest have occurred as far as this Loki's life is concerned. This show picks up right where we last saw him, which was alive in 2012 in Endgame when the Avengers traveled back in time to get the Tesseract for their time heist. And he absconds with the Tesseract because, the Hulk had to take the stairs and the Hulk hates the stairs. Oversimplification of events, but that's what happened. And so, yes, you got to remember this is 2012 Loki. He's still kind of very mischievous. He hasn't grown yet to be the more heroic, again, the anti-hero who kind of still does things for his own, applause, but at the same time is a good guy by the end of Ragnarok and beginning of Infinity War. So, yeah.
Yeah, he's definitely still a very immature Loki when this series starts and opens up. So let's jump into that.
All right.
And the series starts and they come up with the first, they come up with the little hashtag, or not hashtag, but the screening notification for us that this is New York City 2012, which you also saw some of these scenes, or basically all of this, right, was in Endgame.
Yes.
And so it's starting off from that episode. If you have seen Avengers Endgame, then you'll recognize where we are starting the action, which also, if you saw Avengers Endgame, you knew that this is where we were going to end up and where we were going.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to let you talk about what's happening and, drive the bus, and I'll jump in when I need to ask questions.
All right. So like I said, we're starting in 2012 with Loki. This is after he is defeated by the Avengers. And we saw in Endgame that he gets his hands on the Tesseract thanks to the meddling of the Avengers, the future Avengers trying to get the past Avengers Tesseract. I know that sounds super confusing if you haven't seen it. However, the thing you need to know is Loki escapes. And that was the last we saw of him. So they show that. You hear Thor kind of, I guess, in the distance, so to speak, going, Loki, like, where are you? Like, he sees that he's disappeared. Or we know that he sees that he disappeared. So Loki ends up in the Gobi Desert in Mongolia. And he introduces himself the same way he introduced himself in Avengers. I'm Loki of Asgard, and I'm burdened with glorious purpose. And in a hilarious, to me, it was kind of like a callback of Ragnarok when Hela introduces herself to the Asgardians, and they're like, whoever you are. And she's like, whoever I am? Like, weren't you listening? These people are like, who? Why are you here?
Yes.
And he's about to say something or, just be like, whatever, and leave. But then the TVA shows up and he's like, all right, well, whatever, I'm out. And he's like, I'm going to take Tesseract and leave. However, the TVA, they're pretty powerful. They don't look like it. He certainly doesn't think they are, right? He's like, I'm done with people in armor trying to tell me what to do today. So, I'm out. And she hits him with, a time stick that slows time down for him, but not for her. And she wraps a time collar around Loki's neck. And I know you've seen that in the previews and trailers. Basically, it controls him, right? If he tries to run away, they can basically rewind his time, just his time, right? Not anybody else's. Rewind him back to where they need him to be.
And what I loved about that little callback at the beginning where, it's very clever how they're giving those of us who are nostalgic and love Loki like we do, hi, I'm Loki and I'm burdened with glorious purpose. And it's one of his, most famous lines that he's ever had out there. And I was like, yes. And then what I love so much about this is that on one hand, I'm like, okay, it's 2012 Loki still. Like, we've seen this Loki before. But as this whole episode progresses, there's some shift, there's some change, there's some things that happen that give us a little bit different kind of Loki by the end of that first episode. And I was digging that. I love that they started, though, with this 2012 Loki, right?
Right. That arrogant, I'm a god.
Yes, that attitude, that literal, like he's repeating the line that has worked, on women and anybody else, over the years.
Women.
He's dropping his same, he's dropping his same lines, left and right. And he thinks that's going to work. And it, spoiler, does not. So the TVA has jumped in. They are doing their thing. And he has this collar now around his neck. And this is probably one of my favorite little sequences of this whole in processing of Loki to the TVA and what happened here. It was just making me laugh because it was like relatable in so many ways, but it was
hilarious for sure.
It was funny. It was good stuff. So he shows up at the TVA, there's questions, and, of course he still is like, do you not know who I am? And whatever. Right. And they're like, no, we don't, we
don't care.
Yes. So he ends up before a magistrate. He ends up before a judge, and they ask him, are you guilty or not? Again, some great, well-delivered lines there as he talks about what he's guilty of and what he's not guilty of.
Oh, and so what's interesting is, so that's Renslayer that he ends up in front of.
Okay.
And she, in the comics, is connected to Kang the Conqueror, who is the villain for Ant-Man 3.
See, okay, smart.
So you might want to keep an eye on her.
And when
just putting it out there.
It was during this in process of things, I think, when he is talking, when he's being told a little bit about what the TVA is and whatnot, I caught that they said basically timelines and multiverse was mentioned a few times. And as the explanation of what they're trying to stop and what they're trying to change and what they're trying to do comes out, it definitely sounds to me like possibly we're setting up for Multiverse of Madness. Like this could impact or flow into that storyline, that Doctor Strange movie that's coming out. Mm-hmm. Am I on the right path, do you think?
I think so. I think there's some stuff going on at the TVA that not everybody's aware of, and I think it'll become clear, and I think it's totally going to play into the Multiverse of Madness.
Okay. I like it. I love when Marvel connects everything, so that makes me happy. Okay. So he's in front of Renslayer. She basically pronounces him guilty.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
what I found funny really quickly is that when she asked him if he's guilty, first of all, when she said, how do you plead? He's like, gods don't plead. I laughed. So, I was like, oh, Loki. But he goes to blame the Avengers. He goes, if anybody, it was them. They time traveled. And I wonder, and I'd love to get your opinion, do you think he said it just to try to get out of trouble, as in he knows he time traveled, or does he actually realize that they had time traveled and somehow messed up themselves? Because he says that to her.
No, he definitely knows that they time traveled, because later he says you can smell two Tony Stark's colognes a mile away or something along those lines. So he definitely had caught on that there was something going on in that moment when he took the Tesseract. It wasn't just, oh, wait, this happened to fall at my feet. I'm going to snag it and I'll figure this out later. Like, he's quick enough. He was firing on all cylinders that I think he figured out that there was some time travel situation happening going on at that moment. And so, I think he was trying to throw them all under the bus
which is hysterical.
Yes, like, go after them. Yeah. Like, I'm just me. Like, I'm not worthy. The Avengers are who you really want.
Look at those jerks.
Yeah.
So
go get get both Tony Starks with his cologne.
I agree. I thought he knew. Actually, I kind of thought he knew in Endgame too, because he Loki observes. He even says that later on.
Yep, he does. Yes,
about. It might be this it might be the second episode, but he talks about observing and how he learns so many things by listening. So, but what I find funny for everybody who's like, I guess the people that have complained about the time traveling in Endgame, when he says that to her, her response is, well, it was supposed to happen with them. You, however, it was not supposed to happen. So I'm like, oh, that's how they're going to explain it. So Marvel's just basically like, we did it because we could do it. So get over it.
Pretty much.
Which I'm not one of the people that was like mad about the time travel. So it wasn't me that they were talking to.
Nope. It didn't bother me, but yes.
Yeah. So he's pronounced guilty and sentenced to be reset. And we kind of think that resetting means completely obliterating because that's kind of what happened to the other guy who was running his mouth in the lobby. And because Mobius does tell him, I just saved you from death. So pretty sure resetting is a nicer way of saying, yeah, you're dead. So Mobius saves him because he's been chasing this variant that's actually one step ahead of the TVA and taking out their field agents, their Minutemen.
And the variant is basically what they're saying is a change in the timeline, like something that shouldn't be happening happens in the timeline, and that's what a variant is. And there's a whole like spiel that they kind of explain what a variant is in the show. So y'all will all know this by the time you're listening to this, because I doubt anybody's listening to us talk about it if you haven't watched it. But you know what? If you like spoilers, I love spoilers, so maybe that's you. But I just wanted to point that out. That's what a variant is. So when we say the variant. It's something that shouldn't be there. It shouldn't be in the timeline. Right.
And it's a play on words for comic books because there's variants of the characters in comics, and this show is going to play heavily on variants in comics. So just again, little side note, little bit of information. So yes, there is a variant on the loose that is dangerous. This variant is taking out their agents. They're stealing the time resets. So whenever the TVA shows up to fix a timeline, they set a reset charge. And that's exactly what it does. It resets, or as Loki points out, obliterates things within a certain radius to, quote unquote, fix the timeline so that it can then heal itself. That is the whole point of the reset charges. But this variant is killing the Minutemen and taking the reset charges. That's obviously a problem for the TVA. So Mobius is hopeful that Loki is just the person he needs to catch this variant. But what happens is he pulls Loki into the time theater, and they've shown that in the trailers where he's sitting in front of like a little old school looking like iMac screen, but basically watching some events of his life to try to be like, this is you, Loki. And I love the DB Cooper scene, which is hysterical.
My gosh.
He's like, okay, I lost a bet to Thor. Like, what do you want?
Yes. I am a huge, massive, like, unsolved mysteries dork. Like, all my podcasts pretty much revolve around true crime, unsolved mysteries, the weird and the unexplained, the paranatural, all of that cool stuff. Like, I'm totally into this. So the whole DB Cooper thing in the very first trailer where we saw that, I was like, wait. Loki is DB Cooper. And then literally that's what they gave us. I was in love. I was in love so much with that little snippet of information. And then at the end, when he's like, what? I lost a bet to Thor. I just died. It was so great. It was so wonderful. But this timeline of Loki's life that they showed, that is him as a younger Loki, being very mischievous, right? And doing something that, was a little crazy. And that's the whole DB Cooper story. And if you don't know DB Cooper story, go Google that, because it's kind of crazy. And there's a lot of like conspiracies out there as to what actually happened. Because the truth is, we don't know what actually happened with this guy who hijacked this airline. All right. So yes, loved that. And this was, I think, the scene that, I was obviously all in from the moment they told us that there was a Loki series coming, but this was the series of scenes that really started my mind clicking and going, oh, I see what we're playing with here. I see what we're doing here. I see what the construct is going to be when it comes to his life and his timeline and everything. And it was also really great for a fan service point, is that there's, exposition where they're kind of explaining who Loki is and what his experience was like through his life. Right. So yeah, this whole scene was really great. The DB Cooper thing was just the icing on the cake, but even, more fascinating and interesting was him seeing the stuff that hasn't happened yet.
Oh, it was heartbreaking.
It was it was gut wrenching. It just wanted to rip your, Marvel just reached in there, said, hi, this is mine. And they took your heart out and they threw it on the ground and they Hulk smashed it all over the place.
Yes.
And then tried to give it back to you. And it's like, hi, here, you might need this later. Because it was really heartbreaking and it was really well done and just beautiful. But yeah, we see him watching what has happened through all these movies that, he hasn't experienced yet. Because again, we're talking 2012 Loki, but they're going to go ahead. The TVA goes ahead and kind of psychoanalyzes them and tries to push these buttons. I did enjoy that. Can we also talk real quick? Not real quick. We got to talk about him more. But Owen Wilson.
Oh, he's fabulous in this show.
I have always loved Owen Wilson. In fact, kind of funny story. My son's name is Luke Owen. And in part, it was because of the Wilson brothers.
That's hilarious. I did not know that.
Yeah. It was one of those things where we were trying to narrow down names, and we had landed on Luke because we liked the biblical Luke, and we landed on Luke. And I think this was 2003, and prime Owen brothers, like comedy and stuff was happening. They were both in all these movies and stuff at the same time. And I was just looking at a list of names and I was like, there's Luke, there's Owen. Hey, it could be like the Wilson brothers. And we just kind of laughed and Rob's like, wait a minute, Luke Owen, that actually sounds okay. And I was like, done and done. So my little Easter egg hidden in there is the Owen brother or the Wilson brothers. But anyway, so he was not a late announcement. I don't know how long ago he was cast, but I just remember when they announced that he was going to be in this series, there was a lot of questions about it. Ashley, he's amazing.
Yes.
The personality, the comedy, the timing, the delivery, the chemistry between him and Tom Hiddleston and as these two characters. Brilliant casting as always, Marvel. Once again, you did it and you picked the perfect pairing of actors to put together and to give us this story. And I am loving every second of the two of them together. Love it. Just in love with Owen Wilson right now. It's been so good.
They're really great on screen together. The chemistry it's so good. And they, like you said, they play off each other so well. Like Loki's, sarcasm and his still I'm a god, to Owen Wilson.
And Wilson's
it's whatever.
Well, okay. Yeah. Because, he knows you could be a god, but it doesn't matter in the timeline. The timeline is the god. You really are just it doesn't factor in.
Right.
But yeah, it's been really fun to watch the two of them together. And I liked during this scene, Owen Wilson, like I said, he's kind of this chill, kind of plays Owen Wilson type character, nothing, super shocking, but it is shocking because subtly in the subtext that's going on is he is doing all of this psychoanalyzing of Loki, trying to break him down, trying to get him, get to the root of who you are and what's going on. And then we get the bomb dropped on us. Wait, am I jumping way too far ahead? I think I am. So we're going to stop right there. But the point is he's pushing and pressing and asking these questions while he's showing this timeline. It's not just to torture Loki and tell him how awful life turns out for him. He's actually got a purpose behind all of this. So anyway, we're back to that. They're watching this. What else happens next?
Okay, so he does show Loki, the whole Avengers first movie, right? How that ends and the DB Cooper thing. That's the only thing new that he shows Loki that we haven't seen. But then he tells, because Loki again is this is absurd. I don't believe in any of this. And side note, I love when Tom Hiddleston says the word absurd. I don't know why, but I do.
Okay, so yes, multiple Tom Hiddleston isms that I've seen in this is I've seen absurd. He says it multiple times in this series, and he winks a lot. We get some
I love
adorable,
I love it all.
winks from him. Yes, it's been so good.
Sorry.
Anyway,
that was a tangent.
Yeah.
Tom tangent. Anyway, but what was heartbreaking was to show that they know his life. he shows, well, if you hadn't picked up the Tesseract, you would have ended up in a prison cell on in Asgard. And that's this Thor Dark World. So Thor 2, where Loki's brought back home. He's mad. He tells Frigga, "You're not my mom." And, she, as a mother does, is just like, wow, you're very perceptive with everyone but yourself. She still, like, obviously loves him. You can see he loves her too. It's that little kid, grumpy teenager, like, tantrum thing, right?
Yes, I totally wrote down immature child. Like, he's just being a child at this point. Yeah.
Right. So he's super pouty. And what happens, and they show him, they're like, the dark elves break in, and you think you're sending them upstairs to Thor, but where you actually sent them, and he has to watch his mother die, and die because of him telling the dark elves how to get up to the throne room. And he was heartbroken. It was awful to watch. And I had said a couple weeks ago to Jana, I was like, I hope they don't make us watch his mom die again and watch him watch his mom die, because that was one of the most powerful scenes in Thor Dark World, was when Loki makes the illusion of him being fine disappear, and you see just how broken he is after the death of his mother. And he's in that cell. So, and that was just hearing about it, right? So now he's watching it, and he knows now that he's the cause of it. Like, he just broke down. And that's where it stopped. Owen Wilson's character, Mobius, was called out of the room because the TVA agent that captured Loki is like, "You're insane. Like, why are you, talking to him? He's dangerous, yada, yada." And Loki, being Loki, had gotten his hands on the little time controller thing for his collar.
That clicker.
Yeah.
That's right.
I was like, I don't know what it's called exactly. It's like the remote for the collar. So he gets his hands on that, and he escapes. Well, as much as you can escape when you're in a place that has no actual place in the world, because it's between realms. Anyways, time stuff, weird. But this was the part that had me going, shut up. So he escapes. He runs into the clerk who kind of checked him in and took the Tesseract from him. The blue box,
which
right?
was the funniest scene. Well, the blue box, and then he's like, "Wait, look!" He's like looking in a drawer, like a junk drawer.
That's what
and he's
I was like.
"Wait,
what?" I was so like, "Oh my god!" So yes, in the junk drawer of the TVA, where the Tesseract was just chilling, there also happens to be like a handful of Infinity Stones, just in a drawer. In a cabinet.
Yes. And the line is something like, the TVA is so wild or so powerful because even Infinity Stones are worthless here.
Right. No magic works in the TVA. The Infinity Stones don't work in the TVA. And the guy's like, "Oh, yeah, like we get those all the time. Some people use them for a paperweight." And I'm at home going, oh, like I'm freaking out now.
Yeah. He was, this is a great scene, a great little comedic moment, but also laying down the tracks, laying down the information that we needed to know and we needed to hear to understand this wild world of the TVA and the timelines that we're now going to be dealing with.
Yes.
Yeah.
And to know the TVA is more powerful than those. So they're outside of the laws, so to speak, of those Infinity Stones. So it's very interesting, and I can't wait to see where that goes. So Loki, upon seeing the Infinity Stones, he kind of has this realization of, wait a minute, is the TVA the greatest power in the universe? And then it's like that light bulb goes off. Like, maybe I should be doing something here, taking advantage.
The wheels started clicking and turning, that he didn't even know that this was a thing. And now he's like, oh, wait a minute. Because, again, Loki's so smart and he's always steps ahead of everybody else. But you see it. I think the line is something like, is this the greatest power in the universe? And so there we go. He clicks himself back in to the room to watch the end of his life, right?
Yes. Only he didn't know it was the end of his life. It's almost like a little recap for fans. He sees, it kind of fast forwards to Odin dying, and where Odin calls him and Thor, my sons. He sees him and Thor in the elevator at the Grand Master's palace, where they're talking about how Thor's like, I've thought the world of you, like, my whole life, like, which is a very powerful scene in the elevator too, if you go back and watch Ragnarok. And then he sees them standing on the Bifrost to face off against Hela with Valkyrie. And then the end, when Thor's like, you're not so bad after all. If you were here, I'd give you a hug. And he's like, I am here, which is the very end of Ragnarok. And then we have to watch Loki die again. Again, rude. It's rude, Marvel.
Yes.
Like, we know it happens. You could have just been like, and the end.
Well, I think it was important for multiple reasons, because that there's those fans out there who are like, Loki's not really dead. He just did what Loki does. It's an illusion. He looks away. He'll show up later. But what I think was important with this was not only did we see it on his timeline of events from the TVA, but those jerks like follow it up with end of file, like literally pointing out that's it. There is no more Loki story.
Yes.
There's nothing more after this. End of scene. That's it. You get nothing. Good day, sir. Like, we're done. And I think that was, again, smart on Marvel's part, because they put that theory to rest with that simple, clip of showing us a movie, a home movie of his life, but then wrapping it up where the tape runs out, and it literally runs out with a scene that says end of file. So Loki is for real. He's dead in that timeline.
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah, but see, this is where I think possibly, and I know I'm just asking for more trouble. I say that, and then I go, however, he's in a timeline where he's trying to figure out how to change the timeline. Yes. I think that's where his ultimate end goal ends up being. I don't think we're seeing a whole, like, right now he's just trying to understand what the heck is going on. But you saw when he clicked on, oh, those timekeepers are the greatest power. Like,
yes,
I think that's when it starts clicking that his ultimate goal is, and now that he's seen this, and and again, when by the time this end of file scene happens, you saw some changes and some things come through him, and how I think he's changed. So we're still at 2012 dude, because he still is that hilarious, scampy, whatever. But I'm questioning that his motivations, something sunk in with them, seeing him and Thor together, even saying goodbye to Odin as that moment was important in Ragnarok, seeing what happened in Ragnarok to Asgard, all of this stuff factors in. And I think, is setting us up really smartly to see what could happen in the future, or maybe in the past. Who knows, right? I'm just leaving it out there that we've talked about multiverse, we've talked about timelines. Now we have maybe some impetus for Loki to put his hand into things, and it's not just to rule the universe. I think there's a more powerful reasoning maybe for him to do that. But then again, I love him, and I hope that that's the case.
Right. That's where I'm at too. And I mean, there is comic book precedence to bring him back, even if he is dead. Okay. So,
Okay. Well, happen. That's important. That's important.
Stranger things have happened in the MCU.
So the file runs out. Mobius shows up, and they have a conversation.
Yes. So Mobius has been trying to get Loki to either admit to the fact that he enjoys hurting people, or to admit that he does not. And kind of like when we started off this podcast talking about how we neither of us really have ever thought of Loki as 100% bad as a villain. Loki does say, I don't enjoy hurting others. And I was like, thank you. Pointing it out. Loki is not a bad guy. He never has been. Yeah,
he never has been. He straight up says, I do it because I have to, because I've had to. It's part of the illusion. And he talks a little bit about that. And then Mobius says something like...
Mobius doesn't see him as a villain, and he says that.
Yeah. And Loki says, I'm a villain. And Mobius says, that's not how I see it. Right. And so again, we're getting a little bromance going on here, where Mobius is reaching out his hand, trying to come to this, and then this is the point where it all wraps up. This episode is about to finish on this awesome cliffhanger where he's like, "Look, the TVA is formidable," and Mobius says, "Well, I need your help," and he's like, Like, what can I do? You know, what do you need my help? And that's when Mobius drops the bomb.
Yes. So he needs his help because the variant they are after is him. And I called that when they first dropped the Loki trailer. I said, they're going to need him because it's him that they're after. And yeah, so as soon as that happens and Loki's like, wait, like me? You know, they cut to 1858 in Oklahoma and we see the Loki variant in action. He takes out the people that are there. He steals the time reset charges and we fade to black on the hooded figure of the variant Loki watching the destruction occur around him. So, whew. Yes.
Yeah, this variant Loki is not playing around. This variant Loki is definitely bad dude. Like
this variant definitely wants to hurt people.
Yes, definitely
care.
Villain. Right. So yeah, I mean, my overall opinion afterwards, my first reaction was just like, I laughed, I cried, I fell in love with two characters, one new, one old. There's a couple of other side characters that we didn't even really dip into or discuss, but they were like everybody in this show, like got my attention. I'm super happy with the production value, with the way it looks, with the things that are happening, the potential for the story going forward. The only thing I'm a little salty about is, of course, Marvel, you big jerks, you're only giving us 6 episodes. And then yes. I like have to reel myself back because honestly, it's 6 episodes. And this one was 51 minutes long. And the next one I think was like 54 minutes long. So that's like already a whole movie.
Exactly.
Right? Of Loki.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say, of Loki. Not everything else, Loki.
Loki. So potentially we've got like 2 more movies to watch of Loki, right? We're going to get a trilogy of Loki out of just season 1. Because if I'm not wrong, and correct me, but haven't they already announced that there's a season 2?
I thought it was still just in rumor.
Greenlit?
Rumor mode,
Oh,
maybe.
Okay. I'll check and we'll update that. But super excited. And if there's not a season 2, there needs to be because this is amazing.
I think they'd be silly not to do a season 2. Loki is a beloved character and the fans are going to want more. So I'm just saying.
Okay,
Kevin,
well,
listen to us. We need more Loki.
Right, well, you know, Kevin always tunes into the No Guilt Fangirls podcast.
Yeah,
I mean, always. So
for
I know
all
he's
time.
down with this. For all time. That's right. Let's see. It's Loki season 2. I just Googled it, and it does look like.
I didn't think there was anything.
It looks like there's a date that's been leaked, but I don't know that there's been an official Marvel announcement. So we'll see if that happens or not. But anyway, all right. It's getting good. It's going to get even better. And I can say that confidently because I've seen episode 2. But you guys will come back next week for that discussion and Ashley will be with me. And hopefully Julia will be chiming in as well because y'all, like I said, Julia is just the biggest Hiddleston fangirl ever. And this is like her Super Bowl, and it's going to last for six weeks. So we have so much more to talk about. If you want to keep fangirling the MCU, as you do, come back next week after you've watched the next episode, and we'll have some more discussion about that. You can also join us in the Marvel Moms Facebook group. We're going to be talking about it. There's also the No Guilt Disney Facebook group. Both of those groups, we usually have some discussions about what's happening in these shows. Come and join us. Come and, whatever floats your boat. We don't do DC there. We only do Marvel. But please come and join the conversation if you would like to. And no, you do not have to be a mom to join us. All right. It's no fun to fangirl alone. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see y'all next week.
Bye.
Bye, y'all.